to you the most important and actionable information in the nutrition and fitness space. I'm your host, Kunal Jain, also known as Veg Diet Coach. And joining me today as co host is Dev from Mind Muscle Project. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Mrs. Maya Thomas, also known as Food Guide to Fit. Mrs. Thomas has an incredible journey of over 3 decades to share. She started her career as a criminologist, but has since pursued her true passion, health, nutrition, and fitness. She is a certified ACE personal trainer and nutritionist, as well as an IKFF kettlebell trainer. What truly sets her apart is her innovative approach to nutrition, which she refers to as an intelligent diet. She helps people reverse metabolic dysfunction like diabetes, obesity, etc., through a holistic approach that includes intelligent dieting, fasting, strength training, restful sleep, mindful thinking, and humility. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the true path to health, and I'm thrilled because I know our listeners will gain so much from Mrs. Maya Thomas's insights. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Mrs. Maya Thomas. It's an honor to have you with
Thank
us.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Ma'am, can you tell us about your journey? When did your journey start in nutrition and wellness, and what prompted changes in the food and lifestyle for you and your family?
Okay, my personal journey, this is before I even had a family, started very young when I was in my school days, probably around the age of 10 with my father. I used to do a lot of yoga with him. And at the age of 15, I started a very formal everyday routine of 1 hour workout, which wasn't a very normal thing in those days. So I got a lot of, criticism for that. But I'm so glad that I kept it up all these years. So that is my personal journey. The nutrition part, I've always had a good background in nutrition also, again, thanks to my parents and my father especially, who's a doctor. He was an anatomist and a surgeon. He taught me about, bringing food into these categories of carbohydrate, fat, and protein. So every meal was a game we played, where's your carb, where's your fat, where's your protein kind of a thing. So I grew up very early understanding that. Then, of course, I continued this journey of, it wasn't a low carb journey at those days. It was basically a lot of protein and other things on the side. Then I fast forward into the days when I was in college and had this criminology background. And there were many days when food was not very great in, the canteen where I studied. So I would skip food as often as I never got food. So I would skip, and it became a very normal thing for me to never be hungry. I found that I was never hungry. I used to always go home, eat whatever the good food was. And then, of course, I got married. And then my husband, who has a background as a pilot, he became very ill with something that we couldn't figure out what was happening to him. But a lot of things seemed to be going wrong. And when he did his blood test, we found blood pressure was up, triglycerides were out, cholesterol, sugars, every metabolic parameter was out. And that is when we started searching very, very seriously about, what can we do to fix this? Because for pilot in those days, medication was not permitted. And so when we started researching and making mistakes, bringing down the carbs, but not fully cutting it out, we brought down fat a lot. Protein, we never brought down protein because we thought that was fine. We continued like this, things would get kind of slightly better, but not fully better. And then when the internet came, the internet coming to India was a big failure because, we started researching on whatever search engines were there available at that time. And we discovered Dr. Gerald Raven and this whole theory that he propounded of insulin resistance. And so we started researching into that, and we found there were books available. So we bought books at that time. And from then on, we realized that this carbohydrate, especially refined carbohydrates and sugars, were listed as the main problem in this thing. And those days, we never called it metabolic syndrome. It was known as syndrome X. So we decided, okay, we have he has syndrome X, and this is the way to go. We should cut down on our carbs. So that's when we cut down all grains. All the grains disappeared from the house. We just continued with meat and vegetables and lowered our fat intake. And I think literally it took about 2 to 3 months when all his parameters changed. And he was pretty well from then on. And we've been continuing that journey. And whatever we thought, because it was difficult to cook two different types of meals, and anyway, my children also ate the same thing. So we said, whatever is good for the father of this house is good for everybody. And so all my children continued the same diet. And in fact, they used to find it so funny, they used to call it daddy food. So the joke was that, we are having daddy food today. And that is when my journey started. It was about between 25 and 30 years is when this whole new journey of nutrition and wellness started in my family. And then along with that, we started a program of fitness, exercising every day. So that's my personal journey.
Thanks, ma'am. That's a great journey. You're a veteran in this space, and interestingly, you started your career as a criminologist, and you have
Mm.
seen many autopsies. So, what
Yes.
insights do you want to share about the human body from your experiences, from a nutrition and health point of view?
Oh, yeah. That's a very big one because, first of all, the first thing I would say is we take our bodies for granted. Because we can't see what's happening on the inside, we really don't understand the slow, insidious deterioration that happens inside the body. Body is very forgiving when we are in our youth, 20s, 30s, 40s. And then, this cumulative assault of poor food and the stress on our bodies, on our organs, you will find that the deterioration starts from then. And because of seeing these autopsies, I have seen visceral fat up close and personal, and it is a very, very ugly sight. I've seen diseased livers, I've seen diseased kidneys, hearts, all the organs of the body in its most diseased state. But the body looks fine from outside in the sense, yes, people have those big paunches, but legs and rest of them looked okay. So the main thing is we take our bodies for granted, and we should not do that because the build up to disease is very slow and gradual. And because nothing happens to us sometimes up to age 40, 45, 50, we think we are fine and everything is okay. But sometimes at the age of 60, we get surprised and told that we are diabetic, we've got high BP, we've got all kinds of issues. These days, the modern life, because of the easy availability of food and the load of stress that comes on us in the modern world, I think it is happening to us earlier and earlier. In our days, it was like around 50 to 60, you would see this happening. And in those days, it was called disease of affluence because basically people had more money, more access to food, and more access to better lifestyles, or what we thought was better lifestyles then. Those people got diabetes. But today it is happening at 20, 30. I have a 16-year-old girl who is diabetic. So my insight is that we take our bodies for granted, and it is time we stop doing so.
Right, ma'am. So, ma'am, what do you think is the true path or the path to true health in these times?
True health, yes, that's a big one because first of all, we need to first fix our food. Our food habits have literally gone down the drain. So, fixing our food, understanding what food is, why we eat, how often we need to eat, and what we need to eat is number one. Second, we have to exercise every day, just like we, brush our teeth, take bath, do all our, toiletries every day. We have to add in minimum of 1 hour of exercise every day because the body respects movement. Without movement, uh, we will slowly seep into a kind of decay. So we need to add movement every day. And the third thing, very crucial, is we have to manage our stress. And the stress is not just, you know, job or the thing, it's everything. It is from our homes, from our families, how we respond to things that happen to us in life. Our response is what creates the stress response in the body. And so we need to learn how to manage it, whether we are angry or sad or whatever. Basically, the main thing that I see in today's society, there's a lot of anger around, a lot of unprovoked reasons for anger. And one, that's a big thing because society is moving at such a fast pace, people are not able to keep up with anything. And it is breeding a lot of anger and stress. And so these are the three pillars of what we need to worry about for true health. We need food, better nutrition, we need movement, and basically starting with exercise and resistance training to increase muscle mass. And the third one is our spiritual mental wellness. Very, very big three. And I will never change these three things because this is what I've observed in all my years of life.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, usually people talk about nutrition, exercise, but people actually don't look at this factor, which is stress. And it can be quite elusive how to find the reason for stress, which is causing sickness, mental health problems. So, do you want to elaborate on what are the ways we can manage our stress, or how do you guide people or coach them to take care of themselves from a stress point of view?
The people who come to me, the thing is, see, think of stress is a very, it's a word which is very misunderstood. Because first of all, you must have seen articles and books calling stress the silent killer. It is a silent killer because what it's doing inside the body is basically the whole endocrine system is involved. It is, and this is from the early days, prehistoric days, when there were animals roaming the earth, and you could get killed with one swipe of an animal's paw. So it was the response was fight, or you stand there and face the problem and deal with it and resolve, save yourself, or you run away and save yourself. Now, those two responses can be handled in the modern world depending on what the situation is. But very often you can't always do that. And so in most people get stuck in this zone. It's a very strange zone called freeze. You freeze. You don't know what to do. You don't fight or you don't run. And then when that situation happens, your cortisol is elevated because cortisol and adrenaline are the two hormones that rise when you're faced with threats and you have to deal with them. Adrenaline is the number one that happens. During that time, your sugar response goes up, your insulin goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your eyes will dilate, pupils will dilate for you to be able to see better. So there are a lot of physical responses that happen in the body under moments of stress. So for most people, this stress responses now will stay in place. They stay kind of elevated. Slowly the blood pressure goes up. Slowly the sugar goes up. The insulin response goes up. The cortisol stays elevated. So these hormones start getting gradually triggered slowly and slowly over the days, over the years. And that is the basic stress response which is happening in the body, which creates when you add for food choices, especially the way our Indian cultural diet is loaded with carb and very little else, you will find that the stress response and everything gets aggravated, and so the body breaks down very fast. Now, the advice that I give my personal clients is a lot of things is I talk to them about their personal situations. I kind of assess what is troubling them. And then I tell them that at the moment they are faced with something which they are finding stressful, to stop and think before you make a response. You stop, take a deep breath, breathe slowly, count to 10 in your head, and slowly make a response, a very thought out response for the moment. Because that is the only way to deal with it. Either back off and say, okay, I'll think about this and I'll get back to you, or I'll talk to you later, or give me a moment, just give me half an hour, something like that. But move away from that stress response situation and think your situation out, think of your response, and then come back with a measured response. But what again, another thing about the stress response is a lot of us, the human response to life and everything else gets set in place by the age of 12. I wonder if you've read about this, and it is a very, very true thing, because you find a lot of people are like, I've read the saying from somewhere saying that most adults are wounded children walking around in adult bodies. They're never able to, as children, we are only feeling. We're not thinking. We're never in control of our situation. So we are always responding to elders. We're responding to people in school. We're responding to peer pressure. We're responding to anybody and everybody who kind of tries to control us. And so our responses always come from a place of fear and, trying to fit in. And that kind of thing gets carried forward into adulthood. And in fact, all our responses come from a place of trying to deal with that response which we felt with as children. But as you become an adult, you've got to deal with it differently. That is what I call personally emotional wellness. If you are emotionally well, you will realize this is not childhood happening again. This is a whole different situation. Patterns of behaviors will be the same across everything, whether you move from adulthood or your office or the social situation, but patterns of human behavior are the same across the board. So your response should always be appropriate to the situation and not from a place of, reacting violently. When I say violently, not always physical violence, but an emotional response. And that is how the stress response can be brought down. This stress response that happens in the body, it is happening invisibly. You can't see all these different changes happening inside your body, and that is what starts the whole vicious cycle of, the metabolic dysfunction. Like I said, after that you layer on food, alcohol, drugs. I don't know what not of kind of things that people run to. Most visible thing that people go to is food, and that is what causes the stress response. So mental wellness plays a big role in true health, but it is not acknowledged, not looked at, not understood fully today. Today we are so focusing only on the physical part of the food and the fitness. So that is my observation in all these years.
Right, ma'am. Thanks for shining the spotlight on stress and what role it plays in messing up one's health. So, coming to
Yeah.
nutrition, what do you think are some changes people can make in their kitchens which can bring them immediate benefits in terms of improving their metabolic health or even in helping them in reversing some of the metabolic dysfunctions?
Yeah. The first change people can make, if it is possible, is drop the carbohydrates, drop the grains, and drop all access to sugary stuff. Which means, anything that sweetens is sweet on your tongue should be dropped. That is the first change, but it's very hard for people to do. So in my personal classes, I kind of examine the dietary patterns, then I start making them taper it down slowly, just slow changes, bring it down, reduce the quantity. The second most important thing that people must do is stop snacking, because I find again in Indian thing we are so used to snacking every little, especially that evening chai with samosa, chai with something. We have to have that in the evening. It is not required, but that is one. So stop, bring down carbohydrate, sugars, and stop snacking. These are the three immediate things we can do. But like I said, because of human behavior, it's very hard for a lot of people. So I don't force anybody into it. I just teach them how to taper it down. So if you're eating two chapatis, make it one. If you are having that samosa thing, make it half. But you slowly taper them. It's like weaning them off drugs. You taper, you never stop the drug stack. You always, taper it down. The same thing with food. You will find over a period of time, they will get used to not having so much of it. They will start to feel better. They will slowly start to see weight dropping. And then you will find that they will appreciate the whole idea and they will make these changes on their own.
Right, ma'am. Coming to the practical side of changing your diet, ma'am, do you think all the traditional diets which people have across India, can those be made more friendly in terms of metabolic health? How can they be tweaked?
It basically the whole thing is if you're eating a wholesome diet, what we call the balanced diet, which has got some protein, some vegetables, and some fats, and the carbohydrates, the first thing is to taper down that carb. But if you're eating vegetables and protein, then you can keep that going. But it is the carbohydrate and the sugar part that needs to be tapered. So it's easy. If every household, any person is eating something that is called a balanced diet, which has got its component of protein and enough vegetables or a salad or something on the side, you need to keep that. You can continue to keep that. You can eat it in any tasty Indian preparation, whatever whichever state you come from, you can keep that cuisine. If you are used to that kind of cuisine, like a Kerala cuisine or a Punjabi cuisine, you can stick to the same cuisine, but start increasing the protein content and slowly decreasing the grain-based and sugar-based content. It's a very simple, actually very easy to do. It is just that most people get very scared because their diets are more grain heavy and the rest of the things that they eat are very smaller in proportion. So it becomes very scary for them because then they feel what can we eat because those quantities are too small. So what they need to do is start increasing the proportion of the protein-based food and the vegetable-based food, and decrease the carbohydrate-based food, the grain-based food. It's easy. It's very doable. But the first thing is, getting them to wrap their minds around it. For those who have done that, it is so simple. They have, changed their health around completely. So basically, it's easy. It is easy. It just, it's the shifting the proportions of what you eat.
Right, ma'am. Just shift.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Definitely. Just shifting the macros around more in favor of good fats
Yeah.
and proteins, and
Yeah.
it also saves time in the
Uh,
kitchen because your meals become simpler.
Oh, yes. Much simpler. And by the thing, when we call this whole dietary scheme today is called low carb, because all our whether we are eating lentils or we are eating vegetables, these are all carbohydrate substances. They all turn into glucose in the body. So you are getting your carbohydrate anyway. There is no way that the human body is denied of carbohydrate unless you go into pure carnivore. You're never being denied of carbohydrate in all of these kind of diets. But the thing is, because our Indian food, and basically you see, we have a lot of curry. We make a lot of gravy along with these things. So my advice to people is to start making dry. If you're a non-veg eater, then make the preparations dry. Please cut out all that curry, because when you have so much of curry and gravy around it, you need the chapati and you need the rice. It's a very conditioned response, if you know what I mean.
Right.
To be able to soak up the curry with more rice and more chapati. So we need to basically change the approach towards preparing food. So try to make them drier. And if you have lentil based like a dal, by all means use a spoon, put it in a katori, drink it with a spoon. It's very, very simple. Because I have have had clients in the US who, when I tell them, when you're eating Indian, she says, when I eat Indian, I have to have rice. I said, what about if I give you a lentil soup? How will you drink it? She said, I with a spoon. So I said, a dal is nothing but a lentil soup.
Right.
So it's just a kind of shifting your mindset and your conditioning. Because we are all from childhood, we are conditioned to think and eat in a certain way. We thought about food in a certain way. So we need to decondition and recondition and reprogram our minds when we are our approach to food, and everything will fall into place. It is basically extremely simple.
Right, ma'am.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Definitely. It's about accepting that there is
Yeah.
a problem and then intelligently start making
Yeah,
changes on your plate.
exactly. Yeah.
And ma'am, do you have
So
any?
my approach to,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
if you don't, yes, if you don't mind me saying so, but my basic thing is we need education, because people are not, you see, it's not people's fault really, because we've been conditioned this way. So we need to educate people about what food does in our body, how it works, and what it does, and what are the responses. And then when they understand, they will. So there's a saying that says, when you know better, you will do better.
Right.
So the basic thing is re-educating people and gently teaching them how to do, because a lot of people don't want to be told that it's your fault you brought this on, because they didn't know better.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, so you have talked about what changes we can make to our diet. Can we talk about what changes we can make to our eating patterns in terms of how many meals a day, which comes into the intermittent fasting or fasting zones, and how can those things benefit us?
And the thing about intermittent fasting is I like intermittent fasting because it programs you to not be so dependent on food. That is number one. Second thing is, if I notice, because I am as a fitness trainer, nobody expects me to ask for blood works, but I always ask every time a new client comes. I first say get me a blood report, because based on that I can tell them, I can give them dietary advice. So if I notice that their insulin response is fasting insulin is very high, I immediately suggest an intermittent fasting. But then again, a lot of people can't start intermittent fasting stat. They need to be tapered into it, depending on their lifestyle, whether they're housewives, whether they're working, what is their waking pattern, what do they do, their activities, what they eat for breakfast. Again, making the tapering changes and slowly working intermittent fasting into it. If some of them say we can't skip breakfast and I want to skip lunch, then I let them skip lunch, because at one level it is cutting down a certain bunch of calories, and sometimes at office they eat very poorly. So it cuts out that poor eating as well as it gives them a little bit of a rest. So basically, this is resting your pancreas, resting your, you know, your pancreas constantly pumping out insulin to deal with the food. So I do bring in intermittent fasting, but I bring it in slowly and I use it judiciously. Wherever I find fasting insulin extremely high, I always recommend intermittent fasting.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, let's talk about some myths. For example, are problems like diabetes, obesity, to some extent, they can be genetic, but are they more
Mhm.
of lifestyle diseases? What is your take on that?
Yes, these things, because you see, what happens is down the generation, there is certain eating pattern that has been existing in families, and that eating pattern continues. So some people are born with a genetic propensity to, um, higher insulin response and things like that. But all of us, we have the basic, the genetics for all kinds of diseases in us. It's a lifestyle. They say your genes may load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. And if you know that you have a genetic propensity, then you need to be more careful and understand that, I could tip over faster than my a friend who doesn't have the genetic propensity. So I mean, there is a genetic angle to it, but you can always avoid that bullet and you can always change your food and change your lifestyle and you can be perfectly fine. So a lot of people today, when you go to doctors, they just say, oh, it is genetic. Your father is diabetic, your mother is diabetic, your grandfather is diabetic, so you are diabetic, you will be diabetic. So they put medication onto you. So there is no emphasis or there's no impetus to change the diet or to understand that this is what is hurting me. And then again, when we move into today's world where there's so much of food available at any time of day or night, you have the Swiggies and the Zomatos zipping around and bringing food to you whenever you want. And it is no wonder that people are falling faster for these problems because you need to change your pattern. See, if people are not sleeping at night, that causes elevated cortisol, then they're eating all kinds of bad foods at night, that causes another problem. So it is a vicious cycle of behavior patterns, and genetics is not an excuse.
Right, ma'am. And ma'am, how quickly have you seen results? People who have metabolic syndrome or syndrome X. So how fast do you think uh, things
Two
start
months.
improving?
My earliest,
Yeah.
yeah, 2 months.
Wow.
Absolutely, in 2 months you can. If they implement the changes without tapering or starting or taking the time to taper it down, there are people who are so desperate for change that they implement the changes immediately. And 2 months is the earliest I've seen. And with total reversal of weight loss, 25 kgs down, fat percentage down, strength, metabolic improvement, everything coming into place, person feeling really good and happy, 6 months. It is very doable, but you need to want it badly. It's the individual, they need to want it badly enough to feel good. Because there is, the biggest wealth in your life is your health. It doesn't matter if you have a big car or a big house, but if you are well and you're happy and you are not constantly feeling fatigued and dull and ill and needing to go and face a doctor every time, that I can't think of any wealth that is better than that.
That's right, ma'am. Even in my case, I have in 5 to 6 months, I was detected with type 2 diabetes, and I made these changes like lowering down
Mm-hmm.
carbs, doing strength training, etc. And I managed to put it into remission, and I lost 22
Mm-hmm.
kilos of weight. So I feel that
Oh, wonderful.
this message needs to go out that it is doable, but we need to understand how our body functions and what changes we need to make, which I think you have shared with your experience, and I hope the listeners will be able to benefit from that. So, moving to the next section, ma'am, about exercise and physical health, can can you give some tips or advice to people that what kind of exercises are helpful? Is it zone 2 cardio or endurance, or is it strength training, which actually helps in improving metabolism? or metabolic health?
Yeah, actually, my biggest recommendation is strength training, resistance training. You can start with body weight. There is this thing called calisthenics around, when calisthenics can range from very simple, doable to very high, high funda exercises, which I don't recommend right now. But the simple one, body weight exercises using resistance, body weight resistance, tools like kettlebells, dumbbells, barbells, and bands. And you need also the zone 2 cardio. You need some element of high intensity training, like in sprinting or something. And you also need certain amount of flexibility, mobility training. But that is for a different being functional part. But for metabolic stuff, you need the resistance training as well as the zone 2 cardio. You need both.
Right, ma'am.
And for metabolic health, because muscle is the biggest storage place of glycogen, the more muscle mass you build up, the better for you. And I don't mean as in bodybuilder type with steroid-based muscles, but with our everyday kind of food and a good amount of resistance, slowly, building it up slowly over the period of time for getting strength, as well as a certain hypertrophic building up of more muscle mass than we have it currently. And that is a path to wellness. This one plus the good food, and it doesn't have to be keto, carnivore, or anything. It depends on where you are in your health, but you just eat. That's why I use the word intelligently, because you need to know in your thing how much carb do I need, how much fat do I need, and thing. But I don't recommend measuring everything on a scale. I don't count calories. You just have to eyeball everything. And for me, I use cups and teaspoons and tablespoons, and I make them eyeball things. So these three, and you'll be in good metabolic health. Plus, of course, the biggest factor that we talked about earlier, which is the stress. That is, big one. But that's difficult to fix in a 1 hour time span. It is up to the person to understand and deal with this slowly.
Right, ma'am.
Is that am I making sense to
Yes, ma'am,
everybody?
definitely. Everything, ma'am. The whole conversation is flowing very nicely, and thanks for sharing all
Oh,
the
thank you.
insights. I'm sure that everyone listening is gaining a lot of actionable tips here. So I would like to
Yeah,
ask,
but one of the biggest things,
yeah,
Kunal, self-awareness. We need to be aware of who we are.
that's right, ma'am. Self-awareness and then understanding how our body works. That's the key to start.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Dave, do you have any questions you want to ask, ma'am? Just to add on to questions asked so far, or should we open the questions to our audience? Mr. Hemachandar has requested the speaker thing. So, ma'am, can we take up some audience questions?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay. Mr. Hemachandar, please go ahead if you are able. Okay, let me give you the mic again.
I anyone. I have a feeling that those permissions have not been activated.
Yeah, actually I gave the permission, but there is some issue at his end, maybe. I've
I
approved it,
think no.
Mr.
Sometimes on your own system, you need to get activate some permissions
Yes,
if people are using on their mobiles or their.
right. I think he's a speaker now. Mr. Hemachandar,
Mm-hmm.
please go ahead
Mm-hmm.
with your question. You can unmute yourself, please.
The role of fruits in this low carb diet, what you are suggesting. Fruits are required essential for vitamins and other minerals, etc. Doctor says that generally fruits are good for
You
health. Then low carb diet suggests that not to take fruits. It has fructose. Fructose will stored in liver and fatty liver, and it causes damage. What is the take on this?
Yes.
Whether you have to take fruits or
Yeah,
not?
this. So, see, you personally, I don't recommend a lot of fruits,
No, okay.
but you can just stick to protein and vegetables initially. And if once you get to a place of wellness, when everything improves in your system, you can take a little bit of fruit, but I wouldn't depend on fruits for my vitamins and minerals. Vitamins and minerals are there plenty in protein, and vitamins and minerals are there in plenty in the vegetables. So I would prefer that you do that and keep your fruits. If you ever like to have some fruits, by all means you can have a little bit of fruit, but don't eat it in large proportions so that you think you're getting your vitamins and minerals. It's not required because basically you're just overloading yourself with the fructose. And I've seen a lot of people, a lot of clients who don't they're not alcoholics, they don't consume alcohol, but they all have fatty liver.
Yeah.
And fatty liver comes from carbohydrates and fructose.
Okay, okay, madam. And one more thing,
So I would recommend you bring it down. Yes, tell me.
the source of protein for vegetarians, madam. That is, I'm
Yes.
vegetarian, but what other sources?
The sources for vegetarians is very simple. Again, if you are South or North Indian, just stick to yogurt, dahi, curd, or paneer, milk,
Oh,
cheese. These are the sources which give you the protein. Everything else you can do dals, a lot of dals, but they are not sources of protein. They are more complex carbohydrates. They have some amino acids in it, which is part of a protein profile, but they are not complete proteins at all. So I don't recommend that you only stick to dals,
oh,
but please include protein, paneer, dahi, milk, and cheese in your diet, and lots of vegetables, whatever vegetables you like to have. You can add some coconut and things like that if you happen to like that. But and the dal, your meal can be so simple and so tasty and so wonderful, but you need to make sure that you don't add the rice and the chapati and whatever else, all these carbohydrate, grain-based things basically. Please cut that out.
okay, madam. Thank you, madam.
You're welcome. I don't hear Dave on this. Is he there?
Dave, are you there? Are you able to hear us?
I think something has gone wrong because initially he was audible and you were not, and now you're audible and he's not.
Okay, so I'm going to make him a speaker instead of a co-host. I think there is an issue with the co-host thing on
Okay.
X. So, Dave, I've
Okay.
removed the co-host thing. Are you able to hear us now? Dave, it seems you're speaking, but we cannot hear you. Do you want to rejoin, please? Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm still there, but
Are we
Dave,
there?
yeah, we are there. So, Dave, are you able
Okay.
to?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. I can hear you, but your like I cannot hear your voice loudly.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Welcome. We didn't hear you for so long.
Yeah. I've been like you are like full of wisdom. You are have so much experience. It's listening is always better than us talking, right? It's a great pleasure to have you. Right, you're talking like I would like personally invite you to another space some other time because this is like you have so much wisdom. Like we like no amount of books will make up for the practical knowledge you are sharing. And especially interesting stuff like the stress aspect
Substitute
and
for personal experience, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
personal experience is more than anything. And like I love the fact that you said like do not go for curries, make food dry. It's so simple to hear, it's so simple, but it makes all the difference in the world, right? The moment you have a curry, you are going after other things, and when there is a dry form, you can eat it by itself. It's the simplest trick in the world, but my god, that makes all the
Yeah.
difference. So
Actually, this is actually food. Food in our country has a lot of conditioning.
yeah, right. So I
Hello.
yeah, so basically whatever you have shared with us is like, so I'm never like, one thing I want to ask is one, like, I've never heard you or speak or tweet anything about low carb as such. Low carb is a word you often avoided. Uh, is there a better phrase? Is there a better people friendly word? Just a random thought.
I know people ask me personally what I eat, how I manage, and they ask me, are you keto, are you carnivore, are you paleo? I do not like to give names to diets because what
Right,
happens
right.
is when you give a name, people think that it is only for a short period of time, like taking
Yes.
medication. When you get better, then you can go back to your old ways. It is not so.
Right, right.
You need to understand food, and that's why I use the word intelligent eating. You need to understand
That's
what is
like,
doing for your body and
yeah.
eat intelligent.
We don't mind if if we steal this word. It's so good. Intelligent
No,
eating.
no, please.
Yeah,
It's not. It's most welcome. You're most
yeah,
welcome. You can use it because I didn't create the word. You can use it if
yeah,
you want.
yeah. This is.
Be-
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Because
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I don't hear anyone, but may I say something in between?
Yes, please.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Because my tagline, I thought about it for a long time. My handle, it's basically the food guide to fitness because I got so many people coming to me in gyms wherever I've been, walking behind me saying, "What do you do? What exercise do you do?" And I said, "Look, I always tell them it is not the exercise. Exercise is just the second layer, but it's not the exercise. It is your food." And you have to understand, you first have to understand food and change your dietary habits. Only then things will fall into place.
So,
And so therefore very a long time I thought about it and I said the food guide to fitness is what I'm going to call myself, and that's why the name came about.
so if we were to like of three pillars of good health, can we say it's diet, physical activity, and stress? Like these three things, you have to nail it down to be in your
These
best
three.
health,
Yeah.
right? And if you had to like, you know, put it in some order, like prioritize it, what would you be the first thing? Like, it's a very it's a tough question, but I want you to answer it. Like, what would be the number one thing you would go after, and what would be the second priority, and what would be the third priority?
Okay, that's also easy. Number one is food because we have to eat food. It's a
Right.
given. We need food.
Mm-hmm.
Without the food, we are going to die one day. So we need
Mm-hmm.
the food. So first one is understand food, understand what it does for you, and then prioritize it and eat intelligently. And this goes because you see in India we have a lot of sweets. Okay, before pizza and burger and all the westernized food came in, we had all our Indian food, which is halwa and sweets and jalebi and rasgulla and gulab jamun. You name it, and we've got it. Now, sometimes some people overdo all those things, and they call it I have a sweet tooth, and they will keep insist on eating. So we need to understand that it is pleasurable, but at the same time, it is going to be dangerous for you if you overconsume. So the intelligent part of the eating is first eat what the body needs, which is nutrition, which is number one is protein, number two is healthy fats, number three is carbohydrate, which is found in your complex carbs like dals and your vegetables, very tiny amount fruits. Personally, like I said, fruits are very low on the priority for me. And then, of course, comes all these pleasurable, nonsensical foods which don't give you any nutrition, zero nutrition in any of these, but it's pleasurable for the moment. But those things have to be the very, very last priority. do not require at all. If you don't have this thing called sweet tooth and this whole thing called craving, then you please don't touch it. Have it once in a while. I always tell my clients, maybe on a birthday, maybe some, don't attend every birthday, but one odd time you can have cake, you can have things, you can have it. And I have a rule called that 80-20 rule. 80% of the time you have to be spot on with your food choices, and 20% of the time you can allow yourself to indulge a little bit. But that is only when you are in a good place. If you are in a bad place and you're trying to get back to normal and a good place of health, then you must be a little stricter with yourself, and that in certain amount of self-discipline is involved. Whether we like it or not, we need to be a little disciplined. So that is number one. First is food. Second is stress
Right.
management. I'll put stress
Okay.
second. Before exercise, I will put stress. Although I love exercise, has been something that I've done all my life, but you need to understand how to, deal with this world, because a lot of things will come at you. Whether it's your marriage, your personal relationships, your friendships, your office, anything. There's always a stress response that comes. So you need to understand and be intelligent about your responses in different situations. So stress management, number one, I would recommend doing a lot of deep breathing in the evenings when you come home from work. Spend about half an hour doing a lot of like this pranayam and things like that. You can do that. Then there is also something called Yog Nidra. When you are going to sleep, if you can put that on, it causes you to teaches you how to relax your whole body and get good sleep. So sleep is part of the whole thing, which I have not mentioned so far. Sleep, hydration, sunshine, all of those things. So there's a slightly longer list. I have a list of 10 things, but these are the top three. Then fourth comes your sleep. So these top three have to be handled. So for stress, you need to do all of these things and relax yourself. And then if you have the ability and the time in part of your exercise routine, you can feature in something like a yoga, something which is relaxing, or something like Tai Chi. I don't know if any of you have tried Tai Chi. I'm learning Tai Chi at the moment. It is extremely relaxing. It is very calming for the body. It is teaches you to focus your entire self into the movement. So number one, food. Number two, stress management and exercise. These are not exclusive. They are not thing. They should be side by side actually. Managing your stress, and third is exercise. But for people who are struggling to lose weight and get back health, immediately they will all run to the gym. I have noticed first thing they go is to the gym. They will take one personal trainer and they will start exercising, and that does not fix anything. They have to. So number one is food. Number two is stress and exercise together at the same time, and then comes your sleep. I think if you fix these first three things, the sleep falls into place. You will automatically start to sleep better. Then, of course, a lot of hydration. You need to make sure that you're getting your water. You need to get your sunshine, that is early
Right.
morning, not just for the vitamin D, because vitamin D we have supplements, we can take them. Wherever we are lacking in our food, there are good supplements, but make sure that they are quality supplements from certified places, because a lot of people are using chalk powder also today. So you have to, that is a very tricky one to verify. But if you do your research and find a place where it has been
So
recommended highly that this is a good quality product, then use that. But sunshine is more for getting out of your house, getting out of your confined spaces, getting out of sitting every day, and just moving and getting that warmth and sunshine on your body, which is very good for you. That is good for the stress part also. And then the last one I think is very important, a lot of good friendships, not sitting in front of your devices all day. That is the modern day stuff, we have got our cell phones, we have got our iPads, our computers. We are always sitting in front of a device, and the true social connections are lost. And this, I think, this is a big topic all over the world. We only chat through WhatsApp and chat through all of these things. This physical, getting together in a good way, not in a stupid way over drinks and terrible snacks and terrible food. If you understand, I'm an older lady, so I am giving you from my perspective what I see happening in today's world.
ma'am, like we spoke a lot about stress. So one of the things is everyone thinks they are super stressed, and probably that is the case. But is there a blood marker or anything we can use to quantify stress? Like people need some kind of a measure or something so that they can
Yeah.
actually see this is happening and work on it. Is so
Yeah.
shed
So
some light
you
on that,
check your cortisol levels.
right?
Cortisol.
Uh,
Check your cortisol levels. There is
what
the thing
time?
about
Like it's
cortisol.
available? Yeah,
Yeah, basically you should, if you check it in the morning, it is going to be kind of highish, but if it stays high through the day, ideally I like to have a figure that is tested in the evening because it should kind of taper down a little bit to the evening. That's when your body is winding down. Everything,
right.
your body is like a machine that is, wakes up with the sunrise and then it slows down with the sunset. And because of
Mm-hmm.
that, when we don't follow that, cortisol stays elevated through the day and night. And that is what creates poor sleep, creates a hyperinsulinic response,
Right.
which also, then you will get
So
insulin resistance for
so
sure.
somebody can test it around, say, this around this time in a day. It would be a
Yeah,
decent.
around this time. Yeah, definitely. 6, 7, 8. You check it.
Yeah,
You should see the figure if it stays elevated. Again, the morning figure also is okay if there's a range. It is
yeah,
pretty high in that range, and it's in the evening. I think I would suggest a check in the morning and the evening for the same person, and then see where you stand. Then check it again. After putting in all these practices, check it again after a month and see where you stand in that figure. But cortisol is the number that you will check for stress.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
And for stress also, there are a lot of other issues. The body is complex, so there are a lot of things that cause this elevated cortisol. So you will have to be very judicious in I think first line of repair is this food, stress, and the exercise. And if it is still say staying super elevated, there will be other checks that you need to do. You
Is
need
there
to go
is
to a
there
doctor.
any is there any supplement or anything of that sort that would help? Like there are people say ashwagandha helps, magnesium helps. So like, is there any supplement or something of that sort you prescribe?
No, I don't prescribe anything because I've heard of this magnesium glycinate, ashwagandha, and all of these things. But before prescribing something, because I personally don't like to prescribe medications. I'm not a doctor. I'm not like super qualified in that area. So I don't like to just mindlessly prescribe something. So I first get them to change all these things, and then we'll
Right.
check after some time. And
Yeah.
if there is, then I would suggest these things that there are these things that are good for you. Perhaps you can try it and then we'll see.
Okay.
So that's why if you notice my page, I do not give any particular dietary advice or things. Because for me it is a very individual because each one is
Right.
will come to you with a different set of the these responses are numbers that are happening in the body, but the situations that cause these responses are different for each people.
Oh,
You
that's
know
a
what I mean?
wonderful perspective. That's a wonderful
Yeah.
perspective.
So if the situations are different, then the way each individual is dealing with the situation has to be very individualized and very different. So I
Right.
don't give these generic responses for anybody. I deal with
Right.
them
Right.
where they are.
Yeah. So like all of our listeners, make like, please go ahead and follow ma'am's page. Uh, she shares a lot of
Thank you.
stuff. Yeah, so please make sure to follow the page. So do we have any questions? Like if you anybody any of you have any
Dave,
questions, do let us know. If you are
Dave, I
not
have to
willing to
say
come
something to you
forward, then
personally.
at
I like
least.
your page. I have been following you. I want to
Hello?
congratulate you on your page and all the hard work that you do to put out so much of important information. And if you
Thank you,
notice,
madam.
very often I share your stuff on my page.
Yeah, thank you. So
Yeah,
it's
so
like
you're doing a
we
great
are
job.
all in this. Yeah, we are all in this process of educating people, right? Like you said,
Exactly, exactly.
like you mentioned, it's about getting the information. If people have the information and they choose not to act, it's upon the person.
Hmm.
We cannot help
Exactly.
ignorance, but everybody should at least know about things. That is what
Yeah,
you, us, Kunal, everybody are trying to do the same thing. Like, they are trying
yeah,
to get the
yeah,
information across.
yeah. And
So
that is the best we
I
can do. As we learn, we share and hope that others can do better.
yeah, at least like we have seen many people who may not even interact with us, or may not, we don't know that they are following this, but they send DM one
Mm.
day, like direct message one day, I've been following your advice, I've done it with my mother, and I've seen her HbA1c go down. So there are people like that.
Yeah,
So
Yes,
Lack of information will never be a challenge in this day and age. It's just that you have to have the mindset to put it to practice. That's all.
exactly. Yeah, that is exactly. You put it really well.
So, anyone has any questions? Please go ahead. For either or any of us, for ma'am or me or Kunal, any of you have any questions? If you don't want to come forward and speak, at least message the questions and like message in the comments. That would also do.
Yeah, hi, I have one question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how we can track the gastric issue, which food is creating what gastric issue and how much it is fine.
I think, ma'am, you want to answer this, or should I?
I didn't get the question. It is
So
very muffled. I didn't.
his question is basically like which how do I know which food causes more gastric issue and which should I avoid? That's the question, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is his
So
question.
my answer for that is basically, you see, it may be a little bit of a task for you, but I maintain people to make a food diary. So you eat your food, what you've been eating. Please mention the time you eat, what you've eaten, and how many times you've eaten. So make a food diary and then see what you feel after each meal. And whenever you feel that these gastric issues happening, make a note and see, like, if you find a pattern of certain foods. Whenever I eat this food, I'm feeling like this. And then we will try to do an elimination of those foods that are making you feel bad. Am I making sense there? Because when you come straight off, I can't just blindly tell you, okay, drop this, take this, do that, don't do this. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Okay?
Like
Okay. Well,
my suggestion would be I'm just going to share my suggestion also. Like whatever ma'am said is
Yeah.
excellent. But if you are really have suffering from gastric issue, then one of the things you can do is go on an elimination diet. That would be to cut it down to the basics. That would be non-veg, basically meat, fish, and stuff, and take it from there. Like add on like a little bit of stuff and see. And basically, you would know, right? There are a few things which causes major trouble in most people. For example, wheat. Wheat is a common one. Dairy for some people. Soy is a big one.
Yeah.
So these are like common allergens. Mostly, I would say grains. Grains are like a common gut wrecker. So these things, if you avoid, you can most probably improve on your condition. So this is one step, and whatever ma'am said is excellent. Just note down the things you will see. Like, did I eat chapati today, and is that why I'm having bloating? You can correlate these patterns, and you can understand what is going on. So and one thing I always say, as far as the gut is concerned, it's not about what you eat; it's what you avoid, like what you don't eat. That is more important when it comes to the gut. You can eat the most healthiest food, still have gut issues if you are eating the wrong food. Also, avoid the wrong food,
Yeah.
and you are mostly sorted out.
Yeah, exactly. Dave, you're so right, because for a lot of people, like even for me personally, I like dahi, but if I eat it in a certain larger portion, I get gut issues. So the thing is, one is also the poison is in the dose. How much of it can you have? If you go beyond a certain amount, then it might cause gut issues for you. So, like you said, wheat is a big one, soy is another one. So, whatever these things are, if you drop them immediately from your diet, also you may see, pretty good changes. So, for me, it is, figuring it out for yourself with the help of, the coaches that you're following.
I hope the doubt is clear, Mr. Sumit. Do you
yeah.
have any more questions?
Thank you so much. Just one question is is it keeping on open mouth a bit or breathing from mouth? Is it create aid in the gastric acid?
Uh, I didn't get you. Please repeat.
Just like I have a habit of taking the breath from mouth and like sometimes without my conscious, my mouth will be open. Like it,
So basically, he's asking about mouth breathing, right?
yeah. Is it aiding?
Okay. So, ma'am, if you have any inputs on this mouth breathing.
Mouth breathing, what is he asking about mouth breathing? Is it a bad thing?
Yeah, I
He's
think
asking,
yeah he
yeah, he's asking,
In,
ma'am, does
in
mouth
mouth
breathing
breathing,
add to
will
bloating and gastric issues?
Yeah, it will, because you're just, literally gulping air. It will add to your issues. And if you are mouth breathing, you also need to look at your metabolic health. You need to look at how much weight you're carrying, because that is another thing that causes you. You're probably also sleeping like that, with your mouth open, and you're breathing through your mouth. So you need to. It will cause, definitely, it will cause. You will start burping and belching and those things. I wonder if you have any of that.
Right, ma'am. Mouth
What is
breathing is
what
a
is your take on this, Dave?
I agree with whatever you said. Like, yes, mouth breathing can cause gastric issues. That's what we have noticed, and we have noticed, I don't know, maybe this is just anecdotal, we have noticed that when people sort out their diets, we have noticed they resolve some of this mouth breathing, snoring kind of issues. We don't know what is exactly
Mm,
the science behind it, but we have noticed this
mm.
pattern, and that's
right.
something. It's anecdotal, but we've seen a fair bit of this.
I
Yeah, one of the things is basically because visceral fat buildup is high, it's putting pressure on your internal organs. So if you fix your diet and bring down especially the visceral fat, some of these things actually go away. This like sleep apnea, some of them go away, not always, because I have friends who still have it despite having lost weight and things. But sleep apnea is a big thing, and some of them use that machine, that thing called the CPAP machine. But one of the ways to fix it is bringing down your just the gut fat. Visceral fat is a big, big, big issue. If you, what I have seen in my young days, it is not a pretty sight, and it's just putting pressure on on all your organs, and not just that, but infiltrating all the organs.
Right, ma'am. I just want to
So
add to this one point regarding mouth breathing, that it is, as ma'am said, it is an indication of some metabolic problem. It could be sleep apnea, obesity related, even your tongue. The fat builds up in your tongue and it kind of collapses backwards and causes all these sleep apnea issues.
Yes.
So in my case, losing weight did help in reducing my snoring. And mouth breathing is not a good thing. We are supposed to breathe from our nose. If we are mouth breathing, we should consciously try to stop breathing from our mouth and breathe through our nose. That is the healthy way of breathing. People also use mouth tape. They put some kind of a tape vertically just to keep their lips closed. So it is a serious issue, and if someone is mouth breathing, they should look at ways to start breathing from the nose. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And you have personal experience also there, so you're a good person to give guidance on this.
yes, ma'am.
right, so I think we can wind it up, Kunal. Is there any more questions? I don't
Yeah,
see any questions, Kunal.
Yeah, I think there are no more questions. So,
Right,
yeah.
right.
yeah, ma'am. So a big thank you to you, ma'am,
Yes.
our guest, Mrs. Maya
Thank
Thomas.
you so much for to you, Kunal and Dave, for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'm very honored.
Ma'am, it's our honor absolutely to have you
yeah.
on this
Oh,
show, and
We
we'll
thank
have
you.
like to
like,
have you again for some more discussion in future, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I think a big one that we could do is on stress. I have a lot to speak about that.
Definitely.
Stress
and
management, the things that cause stress.
one suggestion is start tweeting more, right? Like voices like yours need to be heard. Like nobody like
Okay, thank you.
till the time we had a private conversation in the DMs, I didn't know much about your experience and stuff. So that's the
Yeah,
request. Be more active. Like that will help others as well. So like voices like yours need to be heard. So anyway, thank you from my
thank
side
you,
as well.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So there are so many of you saying sensible things, so I feel, okay, they're saying the right thing, so why do I need to speak?
No, ma'am. The insights you bring with decades of experience, everyone will learn from you and is learning from you, ma'am. So please be a bit more
Oh,
vocal, and we'll do more sessions
okay,
in
I'll
future
try.
on stress. And we'll tweet out the summary
Okay,
of all the points you have made, excellent points you have made. We'll summarize them and post them so others can read.
okay, Okay.
And also hear the recording. This recording will be available on X, so anyone who missed it can always come back and listen to it.
Okay.
And
Okay.
with that, thank you everyone for tuning in to Healthy X Sundays podcast. Until next time, stay healthy, stay happy, and take care.